I'm the chairman of the official arts agency of the United States government. When I first came to the job 5 years ago, it was not an easy job. In fact, the previous chairman, a wonderful man named Michael Hammond, died after 7 days. I mean, it was a job of enormous pressure. The agency was endangered, the staff was embattled, demoralized, and it was an enormous task that most people thought was insolvable. I have indeed solved it, but what I tried to do was something very simple, which was to ignore all expert advice and to go back to what the agency was begun as during the Great Society program, as a vision of what America might draw from the arts. And I tried to ignore all of the controversies that had really paralyzed the agency for the better part of 2 decades and focus it on something quite simple: to bring the best art possible to the broadest audience possible, to create large public partnerships where we could essentially enrich and I hope transform the lives of millions of Americans. We did this without adequate budget, without adequate staff, resources, or skills, but we did it. And I think maybe I'm idealistic, maybe I'm a pathetic Jimmy Stewart type in believing this. We did it out of idealism, and I think that there's not enough idealism in Washington right now, and lots of people came to our aid. The struggle in my professional life as arts endowment chair is to take the programs we have and bring them to more people than we can afford, which is, in a sense, to create partnerships, to create resources, to break through barriers. I mean, how do we bring arts into the military? How do we bring them into Native American communities, into inner cities, into prisons, you know, when there aren't the avenues to do that easily? And so, you know, there's that, but it's a joyful struggle, I think. I think when you have something good that you're bringing to people, you know, it fills you with a kind of pleasure. As chairman of National Endowment for the Arts, I have higher ambitions because it's my job to, in a sense, enrich the republic by bringing, you know, what the arts and arts education afford. So what I'm hoping to have achieved as chairman of the NEA is something twofold. To, in a sense, have rebuilt the institution so that the NEA becomes an irreplaceable part of American public life. And that the government understands this, the press understands this, the arts community understands this, and out of that will come a never-ending stream of worthy programs of strong support for artists and for educators. In terms of the programs that I've done while I'm chair of the NEA, what I hope is that we brought the best of the arts into millions of lives that wouldn't have had them otherwise, to have given tens of thousands of artists employment that might not have otherwise found really good, challenging employment, and that, you know, perhaps even made the lives of a few 100,000 teachers a little easier because they do incredible and valuable work in our society and get so little support. It's hard for me to see how the arts have changed under my chairmanship. I would like to think that one of the things we've accomplished is to remind people that most people love the arts when good work is presented to them in an engaging and accessible manner. That the audience for poetry is not in the hundreds of thousands, but in the hundreds of millions. The audience for theater, for music, for the visual arts, is something that is actually more common in humanity than we thought. My fear about the arts world today is that it's becoming increasingly sort of insulated. We have these small subcultures of the arts in which the artists and the professionals are very good at talking to one another, but increasingly uninterested or incapable of talking to the general public. I hope that if my chairmanship of the NEA has done anything, is that we've opened up thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of conversations between artists, educators, and the general public, especially with the new generation of Americans. There are so many problems facing the arts today that it's hard to pick just one. Let me pick two. The first is the fact that we live in a world of nonstop commercial mass electronic entertainment. hundreds of TV stations, millions of internet sites, hundreds of thousands of films and video games, and you can actually sort of be connected to an electronic device from the moment you get up till the moment you fall asleep. And I think it has the tendency, and I'm saying this as somebody who likes to watch television, likes to go to the movies, likes all of these things, that left unchecked, unbalanced in life, it breeds a kind of semi-comatose relationship to reality. You're always being lulled into kind of a vague sense of comfort. And even if you sit at one side and make cynical comments at your television, you're still watching it. And I think that it's hard in a world like that for someone to achieve the interiority of existence, to develop an inner life of sufficient depth, of sufficient strength to understand your own destiny. The second thing is that the only force in our society that's strong enough to, in any sense, compete with the mass of electronic media is the educational system. And I see the American educational system in really rather dire straits. And I'll simply talk about the arts. The arts have been systematically removed from most of our schools. And so unless you grow up in an affluent community, you're not likely to have the arts in your education. Which means not only are we not developing an audience for the arts, and that's one thing, but more important, the new generation of Americans are not receiving those spurs to personal growth that the arts create. The purpose of arts education is not to create more artists. It's not to create more audiences. The purpose of arts education is to create a complete human being who can lead a productive life in a free society. You can't do that just through academics and athletics. There are certain things that you can only learn in stories, in songs, you can only see in images. When you take this out of a kid's education, you impoverish their possibilities, both individually and socially. It's as important to educate a child's or an adolescent's emotions as it is their mind. And when you take this out of the education of 60 million American kids, and you focus on developing low-level work skills, I think you have in the offing a cultural, educational, economic, and political disaster. If the arts are going to thrive, if the arts are going to survive, it's going to be because people recognize why they're important. We need people in our society who can articulate a better case for their importance. I think one of the problems right now is that the artists and the intellectuals today are more comfortable talking to each other than they are to a mixed audience. In fact, in many of these areas, they look down on people who can actually address an audience. And I think it's actually more difficult to talk to a mixed audience than it is to a specialized audience, because suddenly you have all these competing value systems, competing claims, and you have to, in a sense, make a larger and more inclusive case for the importance of what you're doing. But if artists and intellectuals do not get better in a sense of conversing with our society, I do believe that we're going to see our society, our culture becoming dumber and dumber. But there's also something else that's part of this that nobody mentions. One of the biggest problems about living in this kind of electronic culture is that we live almost entirely in the present moment. We've lost almost all of our connections with the past. And then we take the present moment and they narrow it down into that part of the present moment which is capable of being turned into entertainment. And so I worry about our society that, first of all, sees so little of the current world and sees virtually nothing of the past. This is not healthy for a society. The way one gets a greater respect for the arts is not through intellectual argumentation, it's through experience. To have sat in a concert hall and have been moved to the deepest center of your humanity, to go to a museum and be simply ravished by what you see, to walk down a street in a city with great architecture and see how powerfully design and architecture mold human behavior for the better. Those are the kind of experiences that I think are transformational. The trouble is if kids don't get them growing up, it's increasingly unlikely that they'll look for them as adults. If we create kids who are essentially lulled into a kind of comfortable, stress-free existence by being mildly entertained all the time, I don't think that we're going to have the heroes, the saints, the reformers that our society needs. And nor will we have the decent, everyday people our society needs.